You're driving through a quiet suburban street. Maybe it's your neighborhood. Maybe it's one you've passed through 100 times. There's a pole on the side of the road, the kind you'd never look twice at, but mounted near the top is a small, weatherproof camera. And in the fraction of a second it takes you to drive past, that camera has already done something you never noticed. It read your license plate, it logged your car's make, color, and direction of travel, it stamped the exact time, and it uploaded all of that to a cloud database, silently, automatically, without you ever knowing it happened. This isn't a scene from a thriller. This is, according to extensive public reporting and documented government contracts, the everyday reality of a company called Flock Safety. In 2025 and 2026, dozens of viral videos began surfacing online, creators discovering these cameras in their own neighborhoods, researchers raising alarms, millions of viewers suddenly asking the same question: is my car already in this database? A figure that has circulated widely in those videos claims there are as many as 82 million cameras in this network. That specific number is difficult to independently verify, and we'll examine what can actually be confirmed throughout this documentary. But what is documented in public contracts, press coverage, and the company's own statements is that the scale of what Flock Safety has built is unlike anything most Americans realize exists. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what happens to your location data every time you leave your driveway, who can access it, To understand how a surveillance network of this scale came to exist, you have to go back to the beginning. The beginning is surprisingly ordinary. Flock Safety was founded in Atlanta, Georgia, with a straightforward pitch aimed at a very specific frustration: porch pirates stealing packages, cars being broken into overnight, and residents in gated communities feeling like local police simply couldn't respond fast enough to do anything about it. The solution the company proposed wasn't a neighborhood watch app or a louder alarm system. It was a camera, a compact, solar-powered, pole-mounted camera designed to read every license plate passed in front of it and log that information automatically. The technology at the heart of the product is called automatic license plate recognition, or ALPR. It's not a new concept. Law enforcement agencies have used ALPR cameras mounted on patrol cars for years. What Flock Safety did was make that technology fixed, passive, and subscription-based. You mount the camera on a pole at the entrance to your neighborhood, connect it to a cellular network. From that moment forward, every vehicle that passes is logged: plate number, timestamp, direction of travel. That data is uploaded to a cloud database that subscribers can search. The early customers were homeowners associations, private communities looking for a way to know which vehicles were coming and going. The sales pitch was simple. If a car gets broken into, you search the database, find every plate that passed that night, hand the list to police. According to press coverage of the company's early growth, that pitch worked. Communities signed up, cases got solved, word spread. Then the police departments came calling. Municipal agencies began signing subscription contracts, and according to public reporting, that's where the scale started to shift dramatically. What had been a neighborhood tool became a law enforcement tool, and the network began to expand across jurisdictions, city by city, county by county, state by state. Some journalists and researchers who have tracked the company's growth describe the result as one of the most extensive automatic license plate reader networks ever assembled in the United States, built not through a federal mandate or a congressional appropriation, through thousands of individual subscription agreements. Flock Safety's stated mission has remained consistent throughout: reduce crime, help communities recover stolen property, and assist law enforcement in solving serious cases. The company has publicly highlighted instances where its data helped locate missing persons or identify vehicles connected to violent crimes. Those documented examples form the core of its public defense. But here's where the story gets complicated, because the same infrastructure that solves a car theft also records where you drive, every day, without you ever knowing it was watching. So how exactly does it do that? And what does it actually capture every time your car rolls past one of those cameras? What is actually happening in that fraction of a second when a Flock camera registers your car? To understand the scale of this network, you first have to understand the technology at its core. It is both simpler and more powerful than most people realize. Here is what happens when your car passes one of these cameras. The device captures a high-resolution image of your vehicle in motion. Onboard software analyzes that image in real time, isolating the license plate and reading the characters with a high degree of accuracy. Within moments, a data packet is created: your plate number, the exact time of the read, and the precise geographic location of the camera. That packet is then transmitted to a cloud-based database, but according to Flock Safety's own public marketing materials, the camera captures considerably more than just your plate. The company uses the term vehicle fingerprinting to describe a capability that reportedly identifies the make, model, and color of a vehicle. In some cases, additional distinguishing details, things like a roof rack, a bumper sticker, or a missing hubcap. The idea, as Flock describes it, is that even if a plate is obscured or altered, the vehicle itself can still be identified by its physical characteristics. Now consider what a single camera can do. On its own, it logs one data point: your car was at this location at this time, moving in this direction. That is useful, but it is what happens when you multiply that camera by thousands that changes the nature of the system entirely. Across a city with dense Flock coverage, every time your vehicle passes a camera, another entry is added to the record. Over the course of a day, those entries begin to form a timeline: where you were in the morning, where you went at noon, what neighborhood you passed through late at night, not because anyone was following you, but because the infrastructure was simply there, logging passively every time you drove by. Law enforcement agencies with Flock subscriptions access this data through a web portal. An officer can enter a license plate number and retrieve a list of every camera in the network that logged that plate, complete with timestamps and map locations. According to publicly documented Flock features, agencies can also set up what the company calls hot lists, databases of plates tied to stolen vehicles, missing persons cases, or wanted suspects. When a plate on that list passes a camera, an alert is sent in real time. As for how long this data is kept, Flock has publicly stated that reads are retained for 30 days by default, though independent researchers have noted that retention settings can vary depending on the specific contract a community or agency has signed. Questions have been raised about whether those settings are consistently enforced in practice. One camera, one data point, tens of thousands of cameras, and suddenly you have something closer to a continuous movement record for every vehicle in range, which raises the question that carries us into the next part of this story. If one camera can map a car's route through a neighborhood, what can an entire interconnected network do? And who, beyond the local police department that installed it, can actually see that data? Understanding the technology is one thing. Understanding who is deploying it and why is where the story gets genuinely surprising. Flock Safety's customer base, as documented in public press coverage and government contract records, is remarkably broad. Municipal police departments, county sheriff's offices, school districts, and perhaps most unexpectedly, homeowners associations. Private residential communities across dozens of U.S. states have signed up for Flock subscriptions, mounting cameras on entrance roads and quiet cul-de-sacs of neighborhoods that, in many cases, would never have had any formal surveillance infrastructure at all. For local governments, the appeal is straightforward to understand. Hiring a police officer is expensive. Training, salary, benefits, overtime, the costs add up quickly. A Flock camera subscription, by comparison, offers something that no officer can provide: continuous 24-hour passive monitoring that never takes a break, never calls in sick, and never misses a plate. Police departments that have adopted the system have cited it publicly in press statements as a tool that has helped recover stolen vehicles, identify suspects in hit-and-run cases, and locate missing persons. Those documented results matter to local officials who answer to residents and city councils asking what public safety dollars are actually buying. The Homeowners Association dimension adds a layer that many people find unsettling when they first encounter it. Because HOAs operate on private roads, they can deploy cameras without the same public notice requirements might apply to a city government installing infrastructure on a public street. Privacy researchers and advocates have raised the documented question of whether every resident in an HOA-covered community is always clearly informed. Their movements are being logged every time they leave or return home. This is not a settled legal question. It varies by state, by contract, and by how individual communities choose to communicate with their members. But the question itself is real, and it has surfaced repeatedly in public reporting. Then there is the dimension that arguably transforms this from a collection of local tools into something qualitatively different. According to public reporting and Flock's own marketing materials, the company operates a network sharing feature, allows participating agencies to access reads from cameras they don't personally own. In practical terms, this means that a plate logged by a camera in one jurisdiction can potentially be searched, seen by law enforcement agencies in entirely different cities, as long as both are Flock subscribers. Privacy researchers and advocates have argued that this interagency sharing effectively creates a national vehicle location network through the back door, assembled not through any federal legislation or public debate, but through thousands of individual subscription agreements signed at the local level. To be clear, that is a documented civil liberties argument, not a confirmed legal finding. Whether such sharing is lawful, appropriate, or adequately overseen is precisely the kind of question that legislators and courts have not yet fully resolved. What is clear is that public awareness of all of this has been growing fast. Throughout 2025 and into 2026, a wave of viral videos showed ordinary people discovering Flock cameras in their own neighborhoods, often for the first time, and reacting with visible alarm. Flock Safety, for its part, has responded publicly by emphasizing that data access is logged and audited. The system exists to solve real crimes and that it operates within existing law. But here is the question that the company's public statements have not fully put to rest, the one we turn to next. What happens when that network isn't as secure as advertised? So we've established the scale: thousands of cameras, millions of reads per day, a network spanning police departments, sheriff's offices, and private homeowners associations across the country, all feeding into a shared cloud database. The question that naturally follows is one that security researchers and independent journalists began asking publicly in 2025 and 2026. The answer they found was uncomfortable. In 2025, a video titled "We Hacked Flock Safety Cameras in Under 30 Seconds" circulated widely online, accumulating millions of views. The creator publicly demonstrated apparent vulnerabilities in how Flock's system could be accessed not by sophisticated nation-state actors, by ordinary people with a modest amount of technical curiosity. The video was careful to show the problem without providing a step-by-step guide. The implication was clear enough to alarm a significant portion of the viewing public. This was not a theoretical risk being described in an academic paper. It was being demonstrated on camera in real time for anyone to watch. Around the same time, another widely viewed video carried the title "This Flock Camera Leak is Like Netflix for Stalkers." The framing was provocative, but the underlying concern it raised was grounded in a real, documented question. If location data captured by these cameras were accessible beyond its intended audience of authorized law enforcement officers, the potential for misuse would be serious. We are talking about a dataset that, in aggregate, could tell a determined bad actor where a specific vehicle is parked every morning, route it takes to work, and when it returns home at night. For a domestic abuse survivor, a journalist, a witness in a criminal case, or simply an ordinary person with a dangerous ex-partner, kind of exposure is not an abstract privacy concern. It is a concrete physical risk. Researchers and advocates who raised this scenario were careful to frame it as a documented possibility, not a confirmed ongoing breach, and that distinction matters. But the possibility alone is significant enough to take seriously. Flock Safety has publicly disputed characterizations of its security as inadequate. The company has stated that its system uses encrypted data transmission, that all access to the database is logged and audited, that role-based permissions limit which users can see which data. These are standard, reasonable security measures, and Flock has been clear that it takes them seriously. The company's position, as stated publicly, is that the system is designed with safeguards and that documented concerns have been addressed or were overstated. But here is where the debate shifts from a technical question to a governance question, and this is where it gets harder to resolve. Even if the system is technically secure today, the question of who is legally authorized to access the data, under what standard and with what judicial oversight, remains genuinely unsettled. Several U.S. states have introduced or passed legislation specifically targeting ALPR data, governing how long it can be retained, who can access it. Whether sharing it across agency lines requires additional authorization. The fact that lawmakers felt the need to write those laws tells you something important. The legal framework governing this data has not kept pace with the technology that generates it, and that gap between what the cameras can do and what the law currently says about it is precisely where the most important unanswered questions live. If the cameras are everywhere and the data is being collected, what legal rights do ordinary Americans actually have over their own movement history? That question does not yet have a clean answer. The cameras are already in place. The data is already being collected. The question that remains, and that no one has fully answered yet, is who decides what happens to it next. That question is no longer theoretical. Lawmakers across the United States are beginning to wrestle with it in real legislative chambers. Several states have passed or are actively debating bills that specifically address automatic license plate reader data, governing how long it can be retained, who can access it, and under what conditions it can be shared between agencies. The fact that these bills exist at all is itself significant. It means the scale of passive surveillance infrastructure has grown large enough that elected officials can no longer ignore it. But legislation moves slowly. Networks do not. At the center of the public debate are two genuinely competing arguments, and both deserve to be heard clearly. Flock safety and the law enforcement agencies that use its network point to documented outcomes: stolen vehicles recovered, missing persons located, violent crimes solved. Evidence that the system delivers real public safety value. These are not invented claims. They appear in press releases, local news coverage, and agency statements across the country. For the communities that have benefited, the calculus is straightforward. On the other side, privacy researchers and civil liberties advocates argue that the issue isn't whether the technology solves crimes, it's what it costs in terms of the relationship between citizens and the institutions that govern them. Mass location tracking without individualized suspicion, they argue, represents a qualitative shift in that relationship, regardless of whether any single data point is ever misused. The concern is structural, not anecdotal. Some researchers have introduced a comparative dimension to this debate. The United States has historically maintained fewer government-operated public surveillance cameras per capita than countries like the United Kingdom or China, a distinction often cited as a marker of a different cultural and legal approach to public space. What some analysts now argue, though carefully, is that private ALPR networks like Flocks may be quietly narrowing that gap, not through any government mandate, but through thousands of individual subscription contracts signed by HOAs, police departments, and county sheriffs. It is worth noting that this is an analytical argument made by researchers, not a verified statistical finding, but it is a serious argument, and it is being made seriously. It isn't only an American question either. Similar ALPR networks are documented and operational in the United Kingdom, Australia, and parts of Europe. The infrastructure of vehicle tracking is a global phenomenon. The governance frameworks around it are still catching up. So here are the questions this documentary deliberately leaves open because they are genuinely unresolved. Should accessing a database of passive location reads require a warrant? Who should have the authority to set data retention limits? Companies, municipalities, or federal law? Should interagency sharing of plate data require explicit legislative authorization before it happens rather than after? These are live policy debates. They do not have settled answers. What the Flock safety story ultimately illustrates is a broader pattern, one that extends far beyond any single company. The infrastructure of surveillance in modern America is increasingly being built not through public legislation and open democratic debate, through private subscription contracts signed one neighborhood at a time, often before most residents know the cameras are there. The cameras are already in place. The data is already being collected. The question that remains, and that no one has fully answered yet, is who decides what happens to it next. If this documentary raised questions you want to keep exploring, drop them in the comments below. And if you want to understand more about how private digital infrastructure is reshaping civil liberties in the modern world, the next video is waiting for you.